Hello, everybody. This is Alan Melchior here. This is Rates and Barrels. I'm here with Eno Saris. And we've had a few spring training games in the books, so good time as any to review some of the early news out of the spring training site. So that's pretty much going to be the theme
It's
here.
all injuries.
Isn't it always, though? Well, this early, there's not too much to talk about in terms of performance, but that's not going to stop us either, right?
Right. Yeah, right.
Few early numbers, but yeah, unfortunately, it's going to be a lot of injury news. It's a drag, but I think if we've been playing for a while, we all know the drill at this point. So, speaking of which, the 2023 Fantasy Baseball Draft Kit is available now on The Athletic to get you ready for those drafts that you still have coming up. Just go to theathletic.com/rates and barrels. And there you can sign up for a great deal, $2 a month for the first year. And that gets you in the door for the draft kit. And of course, for everything else. So,
right now, I've got up those deep sleepers that we talked about, the deep pitching sleepers that we talked about last week. Finally got them on the site. And I realized, looking back, that in last year's Deep Sleeper article, I recommended Spencer Strider. So obviously, in this year's article, I will also recommend someone who will break the rookie record for strikeout rate. It's math.
That's a fair, that's a fair promise. So there's your value right there. I love it. So yeah, go check it out. And again, you get a great deal on it as well. So yeah, now let's go ahead and dig into some of these early news items. And as you kind of pre-announced, we have some bad news, especially in terms of pitchers. Actually, one kind of good news item we'll get to, but a couple of really bad news items. Tyler Glasnow out 6 to 8 weeks with an oblique strain. He is currently sitting at an 85 ADP on Fantasy Pros. Obviously, that's not going to be the ADP going forward. So, how long should we wait to take a flyer on Tyler Glasnow and who in the Rays rotation now maybe gets a chance?
You know what's weird about it? I only had him down for like 130 innings. So he could still get to 130 innings. I mean, like, he's going to start in like May, maybe, and he'll have one more IL stint and he'll get to 120, 130 innings. He's still good. I mean, yes, it's not the right foot. And it's also annoying because it reminds you that it's just not only about the arm. There's all the other parts of the body that can fail. And it is unfortunate for him. Throwing hard is a source of injury. I think that's something you should think about when you're building your team, that maybe some soft tossers that will give you innings totals are good. Like, for example, on my deep sleeper list, I have Kyle Gibson. I'm not recommending him because I think he's going to break out. I'm not recommending him because I think he's going to be amazing. I'm recommending him because he's top 5 in innings in the last 8 years. He's probably going to pitch. It might not be that bad. It'll be useful, and he'll give you innings. So I think there's some sort of marriage between innings and quality that you have to think about. And I don't know. It's different for everybody. There's a lot of people who are super risk averse. Right now, I'm in my TGFBI draft, and I think we're in the 12th round, and Tyler Glasnow has not gone. He sits there lonely atop the pitching queue, and everybody's wondering when somebody's going to go. I have as starting pitchers Shane McClanahan, Hunter Green, and Luis Garcia. So I keep looking at him, and I keep wondering when I'm going to take the jump. The problem is also the shape of the innings has changed. If we thought we were going to get 130 innings, but at least he would start the season with us, then we could think, okay, we can start the season with him. If there is a big injury, we drop him. The decision is later. But starting the season with somebody on your bench who's injured is a different proposition.
Yeah, that it is. And your discussion of your TGFBI draft, that's a good segue for me to talk about the next news item, and that is Joe Musgrove, who broke his toe, dropping a kettlebell on it, his big left toe. So that's news that hurts in a couple of different ways. Now, I took him. I've taken him already. My TGFBI is also in round 12. I took him in round 8. And now I'm wondering if I've already made my first drafting blunder.
After the news or before the news?
After the news. Because I figured
this doesn't seem. It's not. Obliques are worse
for sure. Exactly.
I mean, they're both pain-related injuries, but obliques are more important to the the process of throwing fast. Like for example, was it torso rotation speed velocity is describes 25% of your fastball velocity. So it's probably the biggest thing, and that's your obliques. The obliques are a big part of that. So I don't know. I think the prognosis on Musgrove was 2 weeks no throwing, and then he'll start throwing. So
Exactly.
2 weeks behind, and it could be like the Wheeler thing where we all freaked out about Wheeler last spring, and then I don't even know if he missed a start. Maybe he missed a start. You can be 2 weeks behind in spring. 2 weeks from now, he pitches 1 inning, then he pitches 3 innings, and then or 2 innings, and he pitches 3 innings, then he can pitch 4 probably opening week.
That was kind of my thinking. It also might be a mistake to just assume that it's only going to be 2 weeks. I mean, that's
Right.
best case scenario. So there's a big risk because the timetable is completely undetermined at this point. But I made a calculation at that point that I thought there was a leveling off of the pitching quality at round 8, and why not get a potential SP2 as my SP3?
Right. I mean, right now I'm looking at pitchers that are healthy. I'm looking at pitchers that are projected by my model to have mid 3s and higher ERAs, 3.5, 3.6, 3.7. Right.
Yeah.
I think average is going to be 4.1 or something. So I'm looking at 3.7. Tyler Glasnow is projected by my thing to have a 2.2 ERA. So it's the same thing with Musgrove. It's like, oh, there's a 3.3 ERA on the table who's a little bit hurt, but not a lot hurt, or I'm going to go get like 3.7 oatmeal. So, and I think if you have I think it also depends on how many pitchers you have in hand. Like how many starting pitchers did you have before you had Musgrove?
I had 2, but and here's where I am questioning myself. One of them is Jacob deGrom. So going risky,
I see your future.
Going risky with the first 2 of 3.
Yeah. Well, I have Shane McClanahan and a rookie, so if I made Tyler Glasnow on my 4, there would be a fair amount of risk. But I don't know. Pitching staffs are risky, man.
They just are. It's kind of hard to get around that. I got Max Fried in between the 2, so I feel great about that. And then I just literally, as we were talking, picked up Pablo Lopez for SP4. So
that's good. You kind of went more. You kind of alternated like super high in quality with closer innings. Although Pablo's had some issues with innings.
Yeah. I wouldn't put him in the Gibson category in terms of reliability. Obviously, a much higher ceiling than Gibson. But you mentioned Luis Garcia. I had him in the queue. I think right after Pablo Lopez. Chris Bassett I think is pretty safe. They're all going kind of in the same neighborhood. So yeah, especially given how I've drafted so far, I may need to get Kyle Gibson on there eventually.
But yeah, Glasnow is dropping further than Musgrove.
Yeah, I think he should. In all honesty, because of the type of injury and the timetable as we know it. So that said, in San Diego, any fallout there, obviously, being cautious with drafting Musgrove, but any fallout in terms of who could replace him that would make any difference in their draft status?
It's pretty interesting. One thing I saw was that Nick Martinez threw 4 innings. I was really impressed. I mean, that's like 4 innings at this point. Everybody else has thrown 2. And I thought it might be the WBC, but he's opted out of the WBC. So I think Nick Martinez may be a starter all year. And I think this injury solidifies that. And so now you're talking about Waka is the 4, to begin the year. And who is going to step up at the back end of that rotation. And you start to see why this rotation does not have a ton of depth. So it's going to be Jay Groom.
Seth Lugo, I think,
Seth
too.
Lugo. But, I mean, then there's also the question of, if Seth Lugo was going to be a starter, should he be pitching 2 inning stints already? And I'm going to answer that question right now. I don't think he has been. I've been watching the Padres. I don't even know if he's pitched yet for the Padres.
I don't think so. And again, it's early. Most teams have played like 5 or 6 games at most.
Yeah, but one thing you do notice is that, for example, Nick Martinez has 6 innings pitched. That's why he went to 4. Jay Groom already has 3.2 innings pitched.
That's interesting. Well, this is the kind of spring training development that we should be paying attention to.
And Ryan Weathers has 4 1/3. I do want to switch over here real quick. I do have spring training stuff numbers. And no Ryan Weathers. I hate it. It's always like, did they pitch in front of the machines?
Yeah.
Ryan Weathers has poor fastball shape. He does have 6 strikeouts against 1 walk, and he has the second most innings. Seth Lugo has pitched 1 game and has 2 innings. So that's starter workload, though. He's on the starter workload, but he's behind Groom and Weathers, which I think is interesting.
And again, this early, it's so hard to tell if that means anything. I'm not sure where he is.
But I would see what his next start is. If Seth Lugo goes 4 in the next one, he's probably jumping up ahead of Weathers and Groom, and he's the 5.
Yeah. All right. Well, a situation to watch, at least for the early weeks, and obviously Musgrove situation to watch very closely too, because we don't really know a whole lot yet about the timetable. Now, I did say there was one piece of pretty good news, and that is that Chris Sale is going to be on a mound in a competitive situation. He's going to make his first spring training start and his first start period since last July, coming off of the fractured pinky. So he is going to start on Monday. Sale right now on Fantasy Pros with a 154 ADP, so heavily discounted, but again, for good reason. He has not pitched much the last couple of years.
He also didn't come back with his full stuff when he did, at least not by the stuff rating. So the pitching model has him at 3.73 ERA. I'm not going to claim that that's rock solid and he has no upside beyond that. It's obvious that he's Chris Sale. So I'm pretty interested to see how this start looks.
Yeah, so something to watch on Monday. Mark your calendars for that. That ADP, that seems pretty much risk-free to me.
Especially since despite the stuff numbers being down, he had a 3 ERA for the last 2 seasons he tried to get out there. So
yeah.
I mean, it's definitely, I think where he's going, he's an interesting pitcher.
All right, well, let's move on over to hitters. Actually, a lot more going on here with hitter news. The big news, of course, is Gavin Lux is out for 2023. We just talked about him, last week, and some good developments on Driveline, a little bit of excitement around that. But, of course, it's just a terrible news that he'll be missing the season with a torn ACL in his right knee.
He got injured during our Monday episode. I actually did the little breaking news voice with Chris Welsh and then was watching the replay and live while we were recording the audio. So it was pretty rough to see. I have seen already a lineup for the Dodgers with Chris Taylor at short, which I thought was done with. But, with Miguel Rojas also, there was some injury news with him, but I think Miguel Rojas as the starter, you need to have somebody on the roster that can back him up, and I guess that's going to be Chris Taylor.
Okay, well, I think that's significant because, I wouldn't expect Taylor to play much at shortstop unless whatever this is with Rojas is serious or lingering. But I think just the fact that he'll see some reps there, or we can suppose that he's going to see some reps at shortstop, given how the Dodgers manage the roster, given how versatile Taylor is. I have to think that that's a pretty much of an upwards arrow for him.
Yeah, I think it does make sure that he gets close to full playing time, because he had some risk of losing the center field job, at least against lefties, to Trace Thompson. So maybe he's the center fielder against righties and the backup shortstop and the backup second baseman. I think it also, some people are asking if Michael Busch is going to get the call up. And I think the Taylor news of playing short suggests not really, because you can have 3 players for second base. You don't really want Muncy over there, but if you've got Vargas, Taylor, and Muncy to cover the position, you don't need to call up Busch. So I don't know that Busch is necessarily number 1 with a bullet on this depth chart. I will say Miguel Vargas seems pretty assured of full playing time right now.
What do you think about this Dodger lineup just in general? I think it's not as deep as it's been in recent years, and that's something that we really, I think, should take into account when we're drafting Dodgers and thinking about the run production aspect. Is there reason enough there, you think, maybe to downgrade, especially in the lower part of the portion, some of the Dodger hitters?
It's possible. I also think of the Astros lineup that just won the World Series with Chas McCormick, Martin Maldonado, up the middle. I think teams are okay with 2 empty spots if those spots are defensive forward. And the Dodgers are blessed with a great offensive catcher in Will Smith, maybe the best offensive catcher in the business for non-fantasy reasons. I think fantasy is probably still Real Muto, but overall, I think the lineup is still strong with the 2 weaknesses being Miguel Rojas and center field. And the days that Taylor's in center, that's not that bad. But maybe I overrate David Peralta. I've always liked David Peralta, and I think at least against righties, he's going to be a credible guy. I'm also interested in JD Martinez reuniting with the hitting coach that really helped him break out, and Van Scoyoc, the Dodgers hitting coach. And then even if JD Martinez doesn't, improve, which is actually, not very likely at 35 years old, even if he doesn't improve, last year he was 20% better than league average. He's likely to be about that. So I think in terms of holes on this roster, you're talking about Rojas and Thompson, really. And and that's not that bad.
I will have to admit, I was including Peralta in that, but as you were talking, I realized, that's a pretty nice park factor upgrade for him coming from Arizona. So,
and he's been a guy who, that barrels the ball, makes contact. He's an overall, he's a better player than I think people realize. And, at very least league average. But yeah, okay. If they've got 3 holes, then it's probably, 1 more than they've had in the past. But, they also have the propensity to find people. What if this guy Outman, turns out to be something? I think maybe Outman is maybe a little bit more likely to get some playing time. Hayward seems penciled in as a, going to play against righties at some level. So if Hayward has a great spring, could he play center?
I don't know. At this stage, I wouldn't assume so, but who knows? But you do make a very good point about the Dodgers just finding people. The list is, long and growing. Muncy, Taylor, Justin Turner, find people who were journeymen and make them into really productive regulars. So
Thompson had a 142 WRC plus in 255 plate appearances last year. So I think if you limit him to lefties, you're getting the best out of him.
Yeah. So probably not much there in terms of changing what you factor in for run production.
Just Vargas is solid now, though. I think Vargas is a pretty solid. In my TGFBI, I took Lars Nootbaar, big surprise, and Miguel Vargas was the very next pick. So that's that, and that was the 12th round. So that tells you a little bit about where these types of players are going. I think Nootbaar, has a little bit more assured shot at something like 260, 25-10, but they're kind of similar players in terms of making contact, having a little bit of speed. I believe a little bit more in Nootbaar's power.
Yeah, no, I got sniped on Nootbaar, so but you of course got the job done. No surprise there.
Just cost me a second closer.
All right. Well, let's pivot to the Astros, who you mentioned just a moment ago, and some good news there. The general manager, Dana Brown, expects Yordan Alvarez to be ready for opening day. Of course, he's been dealing with a hand injury, which I feel like has been slightly putting a damper on his ADP on Fantasy Pros. He's going to typically 9th. And do you think he should be more, like top 4, top 5 with that good news?
He doesn't steal bases, and his knees aren't good. Those are the only 2 knocks I can put on the best hitter in baseball. I continue my annoyance with the Astros in not really telling us what's wrong with his wrist. Yeah. And to some extent, Dusty almost flaunting it and being like, "Oh, with HIPAA, I don't have to tell you anything." Well, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know exactly how, what HIPAA is, but I do know that it's tradition that the that the manager tells you what's going on with. That's like what happens. You go into the dugout, and the first thing that happens before every game is, how's that injury? How's it going? How's it progressing? What's going on? When are they coming back? That's like the first 20 minutes of every manager scrum. So
Mhm.
the Astros continue to annoy me when it comes to not telling us what's wrong. We don't know what's wrong with his wrist.
Yeah, and that would
Just that he might be ready for opening day. I would love to know what's wrong with his wrist.
right.
You know, like it would be able to help us a little bit know what's going on, but he's got something on his wrist. Okay, thanks.
Well, and I think you add that to the concerns that you raised, that maybe that, you don't take the chance on him if you're at 5 or 6, for that reason.
I mean, when he's going like 9 and 10, and down there, you start having some question marks, and you also start having more players at the back end of the first round that don't steal bases. So if it's like Yordan Alvarez against Freddie Freeman, he does steal some bases, but he's older. Will he keep stealing bases? The age is a question mark. You start having a few more questions. Oh, do I take Yordan Alvarez or Corbin Burns? Well, one's a pitcher. They have the propensity to break. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll just be drafting in the dark still as far as Yordan Alvarez is concerned. Now,
and it's listed as hand and wrist in different places. Those are totally different.
That is true. Yeah, I said hand, you said wrist. So
hamate.
Well,
and it might be a hamate.
And if it is, then that's a big deal.
I've seen this in so many different places. Oh God. If it's a hamate, that's surgery, and he loses. It doesn't necessarily impact his power. People think that it impacts his power. It's not necessarily that it'll impact his power, but surgery always means recovery in 3 to 4 weeks or something at least.
Yeah. Well, I'm really interested in your interpretation of this next piece of news. Tyler O'Neill and Dylan Carlson are competing for the center field job. Now, that doesn't mean that there's just one starting role for the two of them. It's just who's going to cover center. But as you brought up, I think it was last week, that Jordan Walker, he could be on this roster opening day, or if not, then probably very soon after. So there is going to be a glut in the outfield, as the Cardinals always seem to have. So I will say, Matt, I look at this piece of news, and to me, this is much worse news for Dylan Carlson than for Tyler O'Neill. But I know, what do you see?
Yeah, Dylan Carlson has not wowed with the bat. In terms of plate appearances, which is one of the, like I've been saying, is one of the things I look at. We got Jordan Walker with 9, Dylan Carlson with 8, and Tyler O'Neill with 8. So they're obviously taking a long and hard look there. Alec Burleson also has 7, and he's maybe an option for a 4th outfielder if they decide to send Walker down. I hesitate to even turn the page over to the standard results to look at what's going on. Oh my God, Jordan Walker is slugging 778, and Tyler O'Neill slugging 375, and Carlson is slugging 375. I'm not going to think about it. Don't think about it. Don't look at the results. It's too early to look at the results. But this is a staring match here that is happening at center field, and I think the projections prefer Tyler O'Neill, and so if they're going to go with Tyler, and Carlson has options left, right? So if they're going to go,
because I'm actually not sure.
Let me see. Yeah, I'm sure Carlson has options left. Let me see. It's right here on Fangraphs.
Yeah, it's
3 options left. He has an option.
Oh wow. Okay.
I guess he never got optioned, but that would be kind of a seismic thing in a way, because he's been up for 3 years and hasn't been optioned. But it could also just be we want to see how they look in these places, and Carlson seems headed by the projections, if this is going to be the case, for a backup center field job.
Well, let me reframe the question in a way that I think is more impactful for us when we're staring at our draft queues. So I'm working on a piece, not right now, but on either side of this podcast, on the top 10 players I'm going to fade based on the chances they lose some playing time this year. And in an initial draft, I thought maybe this is a signal that Tyler O'Neill should be one of those. I decided, no, I'm not going to fade him at all, because I think whatever the competition is, I mean, I think he's gonna play full time no matter what, even though he's coming off of sort of a down year.
I mean, he's projected for a 126 WRC plus. Dylan Carlson's projected for 106. And if you think about the error bands around that, you know, that means Tyler O'Neill is likely to be anywhere from like 106 to 140 or whatever, you know, and that means that Dylan Carlson could be anywhere from sub, you know, league average to maybe where Tyler O'Neill is projected to be. So that's a big enough gap where I'm saying if there's a loser here, it's Dylan Carlson.
Yeah. Okay. So no reason to fade Tyler O'Neill as far as either of us are concerned. All right. Moving within the division here, Seiya Suzuki could miss opening day for the Cubs. He's got no oblique strain. So any fallout here, either in terms of waiting on Suzuki or elevating somebody who could fill that slot?
Yeah, I hate these obliques, man. An oblique is like the worst thing to hear in spring because they're just going to be behind. He's projected to be the best hitter by the Bat X. He's projected to be the best hitter on the Cubs. So obviously he'll be fine when he comes back in. But who would replace him in the meantime? I think this solidifies Christopher Morel's
What I was thinking.
spot somewhere, right? Like makes him more likely to hang on to third base, and maybe Wisdom plays third and Morel plays the outfield. Wisdom and Morel are both projected to be around league average. Just looking at the projections, there's nobody that pops out other than like maybe Miles Mastrobuoni makes the team on the back end because there's an extra roster spot, but I don't think that means that he starts. Nelson Velasquez could get more time in the outfield if he could make that roster spot, but I don't think he gets a starting role. In terms of a starting role, I think that just solidifies Morel and puts Wisdom into some sort of platoon, because Wisdom is not great against righties. So I guess, you know, there could be like it does open the window just a little bit for Matt Mervis.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of a crack there for Matt Mervis, you know. And Matt Mervis does lead the team in plate appearances, and he has a 33% walk rate, which
I don't think he's going to sustain that, just going on a limb.
But it is funny because his walk rate really went up every step as he went up in you know, through the minors. And so there was some question of like, what's going on there? It seems like he does have a good eye. Otherwise, he's struck out as many times as he's walked, and he's hit a double. So, too early to say that. But you know, given that he does lead the Cubs in plate appearances, and Morel is right there with him, those are the two I think that could benefit the most from this injury.
All right. Well, let's stick in the NL Central here with the Brewers. Tyrone Taylor to miss at least the first month of the season with a right elbow sprain. Is there anybody? I don't think Taylor was going especially high anyway, but is there anybody to fill the void there? Brian Anderson comes to mind that now becomes relevant.
I have liked Brian Anderson in a lot of drafts so far, and still do. And for me, this puts a hold on a job for him, you know. So I think it also opens the door, I think, for Garrett Mitchell to take the starting center field job. He's been playing a lot for the Brewers, and let me see. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that he leads them in plate appearances. Not quite. He's one or two off the lead. But you know, the big thing with Garrett Mitchell is, you know, he's shown some power. But you know, another question for Garrett Mitchell is strikeouts. And you know, he had decent strikeout rates in the minors, and then last year in his first taste of the majors of 41%. So I think we're all looking at that. And right now, he's struck out 3 times in 9 plate appearances. So that's not the best strikeout rate. That's something I'd watch. But I think Garrett Mitchell was close to a lock anyway, because a lot of places had Tyrone Taylor as a corner outfielder. But I think this makes it more likely he makes the team. Maybe Sal Frelick backs up Brian Anderson in right field, and the opening day maybe Bryce Turang makes the roster now because Luis Urias, Willie Damas, Bryce Turang, Rowdy Tellez across the infield. I think that is more likely now too. Although how excited I'm about Bryce Turang, I don't know. The power has not really been there, and powerless guys have to do everything else for me to really get to the table. And the walks are there. Maybe the contact is there. The defense should be there, but does that make him a great fantasy option? I don't know. The projections are for like a 230 average. Even a full season, he would give you 12 homers and 15 stolen bases or something.
Yeah, which is something a little more exciting with maybe a 260, 270 average, but that's fills maybe
Deep
a late
league,
round
yeah.
need. Yeah, or
Yeah.
certainly deep league. Yeah. Now here's a news item we were talking about just before we started recording. Brendan Rodgers has dislocated his shoulder. There was a piece on MLB.com that suggested that Alan Trejo would be the most likely player to step in, fill in for Rodgers. I've not seen the timetable. I think maybe, you've seen something a little bit more updated and detailed than I have. What's your
They
take
said
on
that there was some damage to the shoulder capsule and that surgery is on the table and he might miss the season. That's unfortunate because I had Rodgers in one of my breakout articles. I don't remember which one, but it's too bad because he had been progressing in his career. It's also too bad for the Rockies because he's one of their few good players. And, I don't think Alan Trejo is a very good player. We're talking about a guy who's had very inconsistent power. Even if he does get to that power, he's got very little patience, and contact is also a question mark. But if you're looking for sort of a warm body that can hit 250 with 15 homers for you, I don't think that, with Garrett Hampson gone, I don't really see that much else as an option. Maybe non-roster Harold Castro as an option. He might make the team, but I think one thing that they do is show their internal guys favorites over external guys, and Harold Castro, Alan Trejo is going to be better defensively. He's a shortstop.
Yeah. From a fantasy perspective, we don't get a vote in this, but I might root for Castro because at least he has hit for average, and maybe with the move to cores, we see a little bit more power. Little bit of intrigue there. Definitely, we're talking deep league with either of these candidates, so something to watch there. And again, especially to see if Rodgers is going to be draftable going forward.
What's the bench in Colorado? If Rodgers is out for the year, build a bench. The build a bench is Brian Serven at backup catcher. You got to have that. Backup center fielder on Fangraphs says Harold Castro's in the mix. I don't know about that. Randall Grichuk, I think, can still probably backup center, but that's not a great option. But and he's a starter somewhere else. So I think Harold Castro makes this team. Harold Castro looks like he's needed in center, backup middle infield. He's listed as the third shortstop on this roster. So you got Harold Castro, Brian Serven on your bench. Man, there's still a lot of open spots there. I suppose Eluhiris Montero could make it. Sean Bouchard is going to make it. So that's your bench probably. Bouchard, Castro, Serven, and one more. So Castro's definitely on this team. I think Castro just made the team.
All right. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that rounds out. Let's go to a couple of items that I personally don't think have a lot of impact, but again, I'm kind of interested to see how this might or might not change things for you. Rhys Hoskins and Ozzie Albies both having some sort of cleanup surgery in the off season. Hoskins with arthroscopic knee surgery back in December. Albies had surgery on his right shoulder in October, and he had been dealing with an impingement prior to that. And of course, Albies dealing with a variety of injuries in 2022.
I believe that there was no labrum damage to Albies' shoulder, as far as I could tell, and that is good news. So, an impingement is not quite labrum fraying. Any sort of labrum repair is a bigger deal. So, I think that's what when they say just a regular cleanup,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it seems not such a big deal. The type of knee surgery that Hoskins had also on the lower end of knee surgeries, meniscus is interesting though, because you have a choice between sort of repairing the meniscus, which takes more rehab time, but is
Mm-hmm.
better for you long term. And do we know if it was meniscus repair?
I don't recall seeing anything about that. So
Yeah,
I don't.
repair.
Oh, it was okay.
Repair. I think that's better for him. I think that's better.
Okay.
Because the other kind is they basically just take the meniscus out, and then you're kind of bone on bone. You have a risk of arthritis going forward. I know we have doctors who listen. I'm sorry if I got it wrong. But my understanding is that repair takes longer to recover from. So if there is anything for Hoskins, it would be that he had to do some rehab this offseason and couldn't do as much hitting. But I don't know. He seems like he's one of those fall out of bed types, don't you think? Like,
Yeah.
worst case scenario, he hits 220 with his 35 homers. I don't know.
It's a difference that matters, but um I guess the question is just, for me, he would be kind of a fallback option anyway. So at that stage, I don't know that this is news that really would make me wait a little longer.
Yeah, the first base is a sneaky tough position.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is sometimes nice to get that Vlad Guerrero, Freddie Freeman, guy at the beginning that just locks it down because, Rowdy Tellez is one of my favorite last chance saloon guys. And when you're kind of after Rowdy Tellez, there's a bit of a line there where it's like, I'm not as excited anymore about any of these guys. What have I done?
Yeah. Well, I made a point in the TGFBI to get Matt Olson pretty early because I do think there's a substantial fall off there. And it's not in the same category with Vlad, but, Freddie Freeman certainly, but
I
much
think
better
there's
than the Rhys Hoskins of the player pool.
I think there's been a little bit of a change in how the league works first base too. I think we used to have a lot more teams like the Rays that were just like, "Hey, we've got some guys and they play first base," and like we'll figure it out. There's been a little bit more of look at the Yankees spending money on Anthony Rizzo,
Right.
and you look at the Dodgers going and getting Freddie Freeman, and you look at the Astros paying Jose Abreu. Those are three of the most progressive teams in baseball. If they're actually valuing first base and making it that such, it also means that there are fewer teams where somebody will gain first base eligibility. It actually
Yeah.
that used to be, I think, something that happened more often. This is sort of anecdotal in terms of, but I think now when I think of someone gaining something, I think of outfield maybe. Um,
No,
uh,
that's a good point. And things have gone sort of topsy turvy from, say 10 years ago when shortstops were really at a premium and it wasn't that deep of a position. And it's like you got first base eligibility. Well, so what?
right.
And now it's really kind of flipped. Where
Mostly,
yeah,
I think because shortstop is where you put your most athletic young player. You put your
mhm,
star. You put in, and so every team is scrambling hard to have a good shortstop. And there's not that many teams that are doing what the Braves and Dodgers are doing right now, which is stopgap type stuff.
yeah,
But the Dodgers sort of backed into that. They kept Gavin Lux in a lot of trades. They didn't want him gone. They wanted him to be their shortstop of the future. So that's what they wanted. And
yeah.
I think the Braves are still headed towards Vaughn Grissom. I'm just a little bit worried about how much Orlando Arcia is playing.
Yeah, that's a good one to watch too. Cause yeah, I've not been that interested in Grissom. because of the same concern. So yeah, that's a good one to watch. Well, speaking of spring trends and spring numbers, we did promise at the outset here that we would talk about some very, very, very early spring numbers here. I'm just going to bring up a couple players, and then I know you've got some spring stuff plus numbers that are interesting. But a couple of players have already joined the 3 home run club: Jared Kelenic and Ronnie Mauricio. Interesting in different ways. Obviously, for Kelenic, we're not that surprised maybe that he would show this kind of early power, but he kind of, I think, needs a good spring maybe to rebuild our confidence in the fantasy community. And then Mauricio, I mean, can he force a roster spot out of this?
I don't think he's at that point yet, but I still think that Beatty's ahead of him, and if it's not Beatty, then it's more likely to be not Beatty. Then I don't think it'll be Mauricio. I think it'll be more likely to be some sort of veteran approach there at third, because they still have Escobar, and instead of having Beatty or Mauricio as a third base option, they could just have Luis Guillorme and then have an extra outfielder, which they seem to have a bit of those. Maybe Ruff makes the team instead of Beatty, that sort of deal. I don't think Mauricio is about to make this team. And the other thing that's interesting about Mauricio is that he's shown power. That has not been the problem. And so the real question for his ceiling, I think, is patience. At this point, I think he's shown that he could come up and hit 240, get on base at like a 290, 300 level, and hit for maybe league average power. But that doesn't sum up to a great major league real life player. And so he's kind of more interesting to fantasy players than in real life. And the big question is, can he either just like get back to like 15% K rate and just be a guy who walks 5%, K's 15%, and like gets a lot out of his balls and plays and has like a 320 OBP? That's one way of going forward for him. The other way is he's got to be more patient. So those are the two things I'm looking at a little bit more than the power output from Ronnie Mauricio.
All right. Well, let's get to those numbers that you were very excited about. Stuff.
Oh
plus.
yeah. It's fun to get stuff plus. I was just talking to Yordan, who points out that the regression amounts by pitch type are very small when you look at some of our best pitches in terms of four-seam fastball. 18 pitches. At 18 pitches, if you were going to project someone's stuff plus on their four-seam fastball going forward, you would start to use their actual stuff plus. So it takes 18 pitches so you start getting more signal than noise. And in fact, we are already at 18 pitches for some of these four-seam fastballs with great stuff. Trevor Megill leads the spring training people who have pitched in front of machines. So not all of spring training. And also you had to have 18 fastballs, but Trevor Megill had a 142 stuff plus on his 21 fastballs. That is really good news. That means the velo's back. That means at least the fastball in place. I also like that he was talking curveball with Max Scherzer. If he can just put together one really solid secondary, he has kind of okay secondaries. If he could have like a really like a plus secondary with that fastball, he has breakout potential and much more than David Peterson, if you ask me. I'm more excited about Trevor Megill than David Peterson.
Yeah, and those two pitchers become a little bit more relevant because there was a news item within the last day or two about the Mets going to a six-man rotation when they don't have a break in the schedule. I think it's like 10 straight games, but also not just limited to that either. So it's not going to be a six-man rotation all season long, but enough that, let's say, somebody like Megill gets, certainly gets more of a chance to start. And then, you get your foot in the door and maybe there's an opportunity for a bigger role. So is that something?
I'd like that for injury prevention and load management on Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer.
Yeah.
I don't like that because it means fewer starts for Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer. And it's the type of thing that people say in spring, and then they discard as soon as the Phillies are, in first place, and they're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So I think that we should take that with just a little grain of salt. But however, with a rotation that old, with that much injury risk, frankly, I think McGill becomes super interesting. Even Peterson, they're going to use both of these guys. I'm just a little bit more excited about McGill. Also in second place there among pitchers that pitched in front of the machines and threw 18 fastballs is Luis Ortiz. Love this guy to death. I don't think they break camp with him. So that's a kind of a guy to stash for later. Bednar's in full form. Nate Peterson's 100-mile-an-hour fastballs are on this list. Ricky Tiedemann only threw 8 four-seam fastballs, but he had a 128 stuff plus. That looks nice. Luis Severino struggled, but his fastball was at a 127 stuff plus. So I am still on the Luis Severino train, and everybody everywhere is asking, what did Andrew Painter look like in the numbers? Andrew Painter had a 110 fastball four-seam stuff plus, which I think is lower than you might expect given the velos he was putting up.
Yeah.
So there is, people were right to maybe question his the shape on his fastball. However, it's still a 110 stuff plus on the fastball, and he still throws as hard as he does. So I think he is good as long as he throws that hard. Andrew Painter's curveball did not register well, but he threw 1, and the cutter and slider did well, but he only threw 9. So I just wanted to comment really quickly on his fastball because he did throw 19 of them, and we're starting to get some notable, somewhat actionable numbers. So if Painter does have a 110 stuff plus fastball, then giddy up.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to coming back to this, revisiting this a little bit later in spring training when we've got more pitchers pitching in front of the cameras, when we've got, or the machines, and we've got more pitches to talk about. Because like I said, if somebody's thrown a pitch 3 times, we certainly want to see a larger sample than that.
There's no regression amount on our list that's that little. The four-seam ball, our model does the best on that, and sliders, 19 sliders. If anybody's interested in this, it's sort of wonky, but it does tell you if you're looking at per pitch type numbers for stuff plus, these are our strongest feet forward. The four-seam fastball 18, slider 19, curveball is 14, and knuckle curve is 21. So I would say you put those two together and you get around 18, 19. Sinker, we've got up to 20. So we're doing good there. Changeup 40. And that gives you a sense, and cutter 31. That gives you a sense of the weaknesses in the model. Those are the things that we're always trying to mess around with. Those are the things we're trying to improve. And then also, just so you know, the locations for all of these, the fastball does well, but it's at 227. So that's why location plus is important, but it takes a long time to come online.
All right. Well, again, we'll see, some more meaningful numbers as we get deeper into spring training. Of course, there's always, caveats with any kind of spring training number, but at least there's, something that can help to inform us. So interesting topic. And that said, if there's things that you have questions for us about, or things that you would be interested in having us discussing, shoot us an email. You can email us at ratesandbarrels@gmail.com. So that's rates and barrels all spelled out. You can ask in the comments section that's right below this video on YouTube, or you can find us on Twitter. Eno is at Eno Saris. I'm at Al Melchior BB, and that's gonna be a wrap then for this episode. But we will be back on Friday with actually I will be back on Friday with Greg Jewett. We'll be talking all kinds of reliever talk. That'll be good, and we'll have you back on the show next week. So thank you all so much for joining us here, and we'll be back again with some more good stuff.
Thanks for listening.